Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Awesome. So good to be here. Wow, what a turnout. I thought we were going to have 20 people with the weather, and I often tell folks that what it would take to get RoyPetitfils out of his house at 7 o'clock at night on a Monday night would be nothing short of a Blessed Mother apparition in my living room. I love my recliner at the end of the day, and so it's just, I really honor you and applaud you guys for being here. Like, it's a really big deal, and your being here says a lot about how much you care about the young people in your life, and about all of our young people. And one of the things I like to say is all our children are all our children. Amen? Amen. It always has, always will, and still does take a village. Right? So the more we all know, the more we can support one another. Amen? Amen. Awesome. So great for you to be here. Great for me to be here. I've never been to this part of Missouri, so I'm very excited. My name is Petitfils. It means little boy in French. Unfortunately, most people say that, which is unfortunate because I work with young people for a living. And I kid you not, as parents are bringing their kids down the hall to see me, I've heard people say numerous times, I know his name looks like pedophile, but you're safe, I promise you. So it means grandson in French for those of you who might be a little more francophone or one who eats the whole cake. This is really just my proof that it did have hair once upon a time, as have several of us I see here in the room who we share the same barber. Just a little bit about me. My family is the most important thing you need to know about me. I love these people on the screen more than you can imagine. My wife, Mindy, who's always right. Me, who's always wrong. And our oldest, Max, who's about to turn 13 soon. I used to say he was perfect, but those days are over because he's a preteen. And our youngest, Ben, who came along 4 years later, and he's special. That's really all I can say about Ben. He's special. Yeah, very special. Very special. This is a more realistic picture of our family last Christmas. But you know, there are plenty of pictures I could show you that, actually there aren't plenty of pictures that I could show you that would show you the real life. And this is real life, but it's a part of the real life, right? There's not a picture or a video that I'm going to show you of my wife and I arguing 2 nights ago right before I was getting ready to leave for 5 days, again, after having been gone a week, right? There's not a video for you to show you that I'm impatient with my kids, just like you are. There's not a video to show you how distracted Mindy and I can often be to the neglect sometimes of our kids, right? We're all broken, and yet we are all blessed. Amen? Amen. We all have our gifts. We all have our shortcomings. I am no exception. I think it's important to disclaim that I have not successfully raised a teenager yet, right? And by successful, I mean keep them alive until they're 25, right? And so that's what we mean by successful. So I haven't raised one. I've just worked with them for the last 25 years as a youth minister and for the last 10 years as a therapist. And I'm the only one in my state that I know of who specializes only in working with adolescents. So that's all I do all day long. And I usually don't get them until they've usually seen a couple of other folks. And you know, I get a chance to work with them. And usually it's because of rapport. And so one of the things I will share with you tonight is how to communicate with your teen, some tricks and some tools and some tips to be able to talk with them about some of these really serious issues that we're going to talk about tonight. And it's important, so important. So we're going to throw a lot out at you, and it's going to be like drinking out of a fire hydrant. But you know, one of the things that I've learned in my experience is that if I just get 1, maybe 2 things out of every presentation I attend or watch online, 1 thing out of a TED Talk, then it's worth my time. Would you be inclined to agree with me? If you just leave here tonight with 1 tip or tool, 1 warning sign, something that either affirms what you already know and you're like, I thought that, but now, you know, the big bald counselor said it's okay, I feel good about it. Maybe something you learned, maybe something you can just augment or tweak in terms of how you relate to teens, whether you parent them, raise them, or minister to them, work with them, teach them, or whatever. Before we get into what's tough, and I do want to know, it's important. I didn't share this last night, and I think to a fault. And this topic is especially dear to my heart. anxiety and depression, self-harm, some of these real serious issues that are going on in young people today. And we're going to talk about the scale and the extent of how that has grown and increased over the last few years. But this is a topic that's dear to my heart. Just a very brief personal testimony. I was raised, like 34% of young people, which we're about to learn, by a single mom. We were poor. They didn't have welfare in the 1970s, but they had food stamps, and we had those. My mom wanted more for me than she was able to offer me, and for her, it was important that I got a private education, because if I had gone to the public schools, which were so bad, she knew that I would drop out of school, get into drugs, and more than likely die before the age of 40, like her 3 sisters' kids did. And so she worked 4 jobs, worked 16, 18 hours a day to send me to a Catholic school. I was home alone a lot in a roach rundown, rat-infested shack of an apartment. And I turned to food as a kid early on, because in South Louisiana, in case you missed it, I'm from South Louisiana. I'm a certified Cajun, right? We have lots of very good, inexpensive food, and I used food to medicate. And by the time I graduated from high school, I weighed over 535 pounds. I was clinically depressed probably since I was about 8 or 9 years old. I had at least a passive suicidal ideation, I remember, from the age of 10, and an active one, meaning I really thought obsessively about taking my own life when I was in high school. And so this topic is really important to me. I was very fortunate that in the next 5 years after I graduated from high school, at the bottom of my class, I thought I was stupid and realized that I was just depressed and couldn't focus. I did not think I was stupid until I was 30 years old. I had a group of construction workers who saw more in me than I could see, and a Catholic priest and a few folks who saw me when I was in college, who saw underneath my 535 pounds of anger, hate, loneliness, sadness, isolation, and feeling invisible, and it turned my life around. And that priest and that group of people and some other folks in my life during the 4 or 5 years after I graduated from high school taught me a lot about how to manage the mental illnesses that I inherited, which would be major depressive disorder and generalized anxiety disorder, and flirted with some OCD too when I was a kid. So this topic is really important to me. So in addition to my clinical experience, I speak as someone who currently still struggles to manage my anxiety. And if you had been here about an hour ago, you would have had a front row seat to see my anxiety when I couldn't get that screen working and we couldn't get the mics working. And bless their hearts, Lynn and Katie and Sister and everybody was so awesome. So thank you. But that's kind of my journey, and I think it's important that you know, one of the reasons I'm so passionate about it. What's tough for you, and I just want to hear a few, what's tough about raising or working with adolescents today? Communication. Well, just shout it out.
Information overload.
Information from them to you, or are you giving them information overload?
No, they have so much information and they're subjected to so much information.
Okay, so they are, because often my teens will tell me that in my office, information overload from mom, information overload from dad. But what you're saying is that information, data coming in from all sorts of sources. Yeah, true. Phones, technology, no question. We'll address that. Seeing them in pain. It's hard to watch them in pain and feel powerless that might not be able to do anything about it. Yeah, maybe 1 or 2 more. What's tough? Just relating to them, engaging them, how to have a relationship. And you know, it's for a lot of folks, for most of us, it's a little easier when they're younger, but as they get into the teen years, right? During middle school, just real quick on a little bit of psychology, and I talked to a few of you guys about it already. During middle school, your child loses half their brain, at least half, right? It's called neural pruning. If you've seen the movie Inside Out by Pixar, it's brilliant psychology in the movie. It's perfectly accurate, by the way, right? It goes into deep storage, neural pruning, and they lose half their brain. And that's why you should have a handicap license plate on your car if you have a middle school student, because they really are working with half a deck. And then as they go into high school, what starts to happen is that prefrontal cortex that we all have, which can regulate emotion in adults, and we have it, Allstate, State Farm, and insurance companies know that your teenager doesn't have it, and that's why they bend you over and spank you and ask for all of your money when you let them drive, right? And so what happens in the teens is that their amygdala, right, which is that emotional center of the brain, is just like real hot and real reactive. Ours is too, but we've got a governor on it, and they don't. And so that's one of the reasons they're so emotional, and it's so hard to relate with them. So there is some science behind that. So tonight's presentation, what young people want you to know but don't tell you. Most folks are always asking me why. Roy, if they want me to know the information so doggone bad, why don't they tell me? So if you're going to write something down, and you don't have to, I'll send it to you. One to remember, young people are experience-rich, teens especially, are experience-rich but language-poor. Right? I am using what scientists call an expressive vocabulary, right? Which is, let's say, X. But we all have another vocabulary, which is our receptive vocabulary, the words that we can recognize, which is exponentially bigger than our expressive vocabulary. The problem is when you're young, your expressive vocabulary is so small that to figure it out and to be able to articulate those complex experiences that teens have. Let me just give you an example. How many of you in here have kids? Parents, raise your hands. Good. All right, but you can put them down. How many of you actually like them? I'm just curious. Not as many. Yeah, put your hand. Okay. I saw you. I saw. Yeah, so your kid comes home at the end of the day, and you go, how was your day? And you hear what? Absolutely, you got a boy. Who said, Yeah, knew it. All right, exactly. So if you're good, most people say good and fine, and that's great because at least it's an intelligible word. I get a grunt, right? I don't know. And parents, we don't like that, right? We don't like hearing good and fine. And here's what happens. Like there's a part of our brain that doesn't work when we have kids. And so we don't see the 12-year-old boy. How was your day, right? We don't see the 12-year-old boy. We see Oprah. And what we're really hoping for is when we say, how was your day? What we're really wanting, and watch, you know I'm right, what we're really wanting is for that 12-year-old, half-a-brain boy to go, no, Mom, no, it's always about me, me, me. Those days are over. How was your day? Right? And Mom, can we go cuddle? Maybe light a scented candle, open the scriptures. Let's really break it open. I want to connect, right? I see some of you like you're dabbing the tears. You're like, that would be awesome, right? It's parent crack. Who doesn't want that, right? We don't. But they say, fine. So let me tell you how their day was. Their day hasn't stopped for the last 2 years. It's been going on 365 days a year, 24/7, 7 days a week. It's broken up. Their online world continues constantly for most teens. For most teens, their day exists for about 18 hours a day, and it's interrupted by an already interrupted sleep schedule, right, for about 6 hours, which is about the average of what young people sleep, which is 2 to 3 hours less than they need. Their day, they would probably want to ask you, which part of my day do you want to know how it was, right? And it's not that they don't have the experience, they don't have the vocabulary to attune to it. So just one tip on that, don't abuse it, right? Don't abuse it, but if you can make it more concrete and less abstract, which how is your day is a very abstract question, right? A concrete question might be on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being great, 1 being terrible, how is your day, right? And they will say 5, right? Because they don't want to give it. And so your follow-up to that is, well, what would have made it an 8? Don't say 10 because it's hard to think about perfection. What would have made it an 8? And then you can follow that up, well, why wasn't it a 2, right? And teens will answer that. But if you do that every day or even once a week, they're going to get onto your little game and they're going to play you just like they're currently playing you. So use it about once a month, right? But that question is another example of if you can make it concrete. So when you're talking with them, say, well, I remember you mentioned this situation with your friend. How's that going, right? And they might still blow you off, but don't stop doing that because what I know is that those teenagers are hearing it and they're feeling the love from you. If you walk out of here with nothing else tonight, it's really important that you know this, that more than anything else, what teenagers want you to know but they're not going to tell you, not just because of language, but because of ego strength, and it's a little too intimate and vulnerable for them. More than anything else, what they most deeply want is a meaningful relationship with their parents and other significant adults in their life. All evidence shows to the contrary, right? Because they're nonverbals and sometimes they're verbals, and their behavior of never wanting to spend time with us leads us to think that they don't want anything to do with us, and that's not true. I had a 16-year-old junior on a high school retreat I was leading a long time ago, about 15, 20 years ago. And I remember it was a Saturday night, the teens were getting heavy deep and real. And she speaks up in our little small group and she said, "Mr. Pedophile." I was like, that's when I learned to have them call me Mr. P. And then I went to an elementary school and they called me Mr. Pee-Pee, which that was special. Mr. Pedophile, why, if you had kids, and I know you don't, but if you had kids, would you and your wife go off to Paris for a week and leave your 16-year-old daughter home with her keys to the $75,000 Land Rover in the mansion, all alone, unsupervised for a week? And luckily, the counselor in me was already budding up, and because it occurred to me that this kid's parents probably could afford to have several attorneys on retainer. And so I did not answer that question. And I was like, "Well, what do you think?" And she said, "Look, I love my stuff, don't get me wrong. And I'll kill you if you tell my parents this. But more than any of that stuff, what I really want is them." And she said, "I know that I do things to push them away, but if they were honest, they would be honest and say that they do things to push me away too, or to avoid me because they don't know how to deal with me." And I try to talk to them about that sometimes, and they don't necessarily want to engage me. And I saw the heads bobbing up and down, right? And what that young person was trying to communicate, and what all of them agreed with, is that they do want a meaningful relationship with us. It's just a strained relationship, and they want it on their terms. And I'm not here to suggest that we should give it to them on their terms, but there is a compromise, right, that we have to reach during adolescence, right? Again, I say this as somebody who has not successfully raised one. It's easy for me to talk to your teens. It's going to be very difficult for me to talk to my teenager. And so I know that. How many of you guys have heard of déjà vu before? Yeah, right? Déjà vu simply is experiencing a new thing, but feeling like I have experienced this sometime before, or maybe even many times before. One of the graces that I think we as parents and people who are blessed with the privilege to work with young people should pray for is the grace of vujade. You probably didn't even know that existed, and you're going to use this. Like, you're going to be at the bar and you're going to be like dropping a, "Hey, did you know there's a vujade?" Right? And vujade is experiencing something that you've experienced maybe many times before, and experiencing it like you've never experienced it before. Seeing someone, encountering someone that you may live with and know very, very well, but being able to see them and be open to them in a way like you're seeing them and encountering them for the first time. And our Eastern brothers and sisters, in their tradition, they call it a beginner's mind, right? To be able to always have the beginner's mind. And that's a grace that we can pray for. Let me just quickly set the backdrop, and I'm going to move through this real quick because I really want to save a lot of time for Q&A, and I want to give you some more, but I want you to see the backdrop that our young people are in today. About 34% with single parents. In the last 5 years, the number of young people being raised by grandparents has increased over 100%. We got 2.4 million young people being raised by 4.5 million grandparents. I'm vice versa, my bad. The average family will spend less than 2 hours a day in face-to-face communication. That's everybody, not just one-on-one, where each person in the family, on average, will spend more than 9 hours a day on a screen. The research is showing that the average person, not just young people, will spend at least 6 hours a day on a screen, not with educational technology or with work using their technology, but for entertainment purposes and technology. And that is where we're finding is where the rub is. It's not the technology, it's not just the technology, it's what we're using the technology for. The average couple will get less than 10 minutes a day in uninterrupted communication, and the average father will spend less than 7 minutes a day interacting with their kid. We have a lot of families today who can all be in the same room. And I don't know about you, but I know in my house that we have experienced it before. I'll get home and I'll look around sometimes, and we will not all just be on our individual screens, but we will all be on one screen and we're all sharing the TV screen, right? And we look around and I was like, this is crazy. What are we doing? And it's not good for us, and we're trying to set boundaries around it as well. This doesn't exist anymore for the most part, that father knows best. Some of you are in here old enough to remember Ward Cleaver, Leave It to Beaver. Dad goes out, earns the money, mom stays home, has baked cookies ready with a white apron on at the end of the day as the kids get off the bus with a milk that was brought by the milkman, and they have 2.478 kids who are just beautiful and perfect and smiles. That doesn't exist anymore. The family, the modern family, and about half of them we know, the divorce rate's still hovering around 45%. Of the 45% who do separate and divorce, 67% of those families are blended families, which for a lot of young people, and I know we have some here tonight, for a lot of young people, it's wonderful, the blended family. But for an equal, perhaps even greater number of young people, being in a blended family is a risk factor because they may or may not have gotten a vote in blending the families. And now they've got to love and like somebody who is not their mom or dad or brother or sister by blood, and they may or may not want to. And so it can be tough. It can be tough. About 500,000 young people are in foster care, and about 2.5 million young people are adopted. All of these put young people at risk for some of these creepy crawlies that we're going to talk about tonight, like anxiety and depression, right? About 59% of moms work. This is a misleading statistic. We believe that there's well over 1 million young people who live in homes where there is a same-sex relationship. We think that we estimate based on outdated census data that there's about 500,000 young people living in homes where there is a same-sex marriage. We're going to play a little game. You ready? Everybody ready? True or false? Here we go. All right. Too much stress can lead to anxiety and depression. Raise your hand if you think that's true. We're going to start easy and get more difficult. Great, awesome. Everybody's right. It is true. Too much stress can definitely lead to anxiety. Now, stress is a good thing, right? Stress can be good. Stress will motivate us. Stress puts us under pressure. It gets some chemicals going in our body that feel good. Some of us in this room are addicted to stress, and we're addicted to those chemicals, and we call ourselves adrenaline junkies, right? Anxiety is the second most commonly diagnosed mental health condition in our country today. Question, true or false? It's at least true. It's actually the number one. Anxiety is the number one most diagnosed mental health concern in our country today, not just with young people, but with adults as well. We have unquestionably an anxiety epidemic in our country today, and it's especially attacking our young people. In the last 10 years, the rate of anxiety has more than doubled. In 2006, we had 1 in 10, and today we've got 1 in 5. And achievement-oriented communities, right? And achievement-oriented households. Now, there are a lot of things that might make a household or a school achievement-oriented, but let's suffice to say, kids who are in honors classes, kids who are college-bound, AP classes, private schools, kids who tend to be high achievers, and that number, it's usually closer to 1 in 2 or 1 in 3. 1 in 3 with anxiety. Anxiety can cause depression. This is important. Is that true or false, you think? True? How many of you think that's true? It's exhausting to worry all the time. It's exhausting to go through your life, and trust me, I know, what if? Anxiety, if you don't have anxiety and you've never really experienced anxiety, real anxiety, picture yourself not able to swim and being in a pool and your hands are tied behind your back and you've only got your feet, like a Navy SEAL, right, to be able to kick you up and to get above water, right? It always feels like you're just trying to. And the panic that sets in when you can't breathe, right, that is what it's like to have just a taste of anxiety. It's what it feels like when a panic attack, for some people, kind of comes on. It's a real deal. Nearly 5% of teens have a major depressive episode, meaning they get depressed, like clinically depressed when they're in high school. True or false? False. False. It's actually 1 in 8. 2 years ago it was 1 in 11. Now it's 1 in 8 young people have a major depressive episode. Even more concerning is that only 1 in 5 of those teens get help. At least 2 reasons for that. 1, teens don't feel safe coming to adults. There's still a lot of shame and stigma around mental health, and so the teens don't come forward. Secondly, as a generation of adults, and my Facebook feed is no different, and I've watched a few Catholic educators post in the last few days saying that they think that it's all in young people's heads, they just need to buck up, and that most of the anxiety today is fabricated and it's only young people's way of manipulating us in order to get their way. Now, there's some truth in that, but I would argue that that's a small percentage of young people, right? We as adults, if we don't believe that it's real, and I'm here tonight because I know that it's real, I see it. Have I worked with kids who are, I know, trying to play the system, trying to get out of stuff, playing the mental health card? Absolutely. But they are in the minority. They are in the minority. Many teens who self-harm, which would mean cutting or any other way that they could hurt themselves, and they do it in a bunch of different ways, punching, hair pulling, carving, burning, are pre-suicidal. True or false? True, right? We think that. And this is false because it's so counterintuitive. Because for a number of us in here, and you know who you are, right? When we were growing up, it was, well, what are you going to do? Slit your wrists, right? And so we tend to associate that with cutting. The truth is that 98.4% of young people who self-injure are not suicidal. They've never had a suicidal thought, and they have no intention of ever taking their life. They do it in order to feel better, because it activates a certain part of the brain. There's a few different pain receptors in the brain, and one of them, the anterior cingulate cortex, cannot differentiate between physical and emotional pain. And when it receives any sort of pain signal, one of the primary tasks of the brain is to suppress distraction, to suppress pain, and it will send out chemicals to suppress pain, but again, it doesn't differentiate. So if they cut, right, the brain's already at work, and it's not only going to make that feel better, but it's going to make this feel better as well. And so a lot of adults really have a hard time understanding why teens do it. They do it to feel better because they would rather feel the physical pain, the enduring physical pain, and have even momentary relief of the emotional pain that they're going. And they know it's momentary. 1 in 4, 25% of young people self-injure. This is an important talking point with teens. And they might not, even if you ask, and we're going to talk about how to talk to them, how to get into that with them, but even if you ask and they say no, they still know that you care, at least that you're asking. And you've earned some cred with them by asking about it, because now you know that it's a real deal. Now they know that you know it's a real deal. 1 in 10 girls diagnosable eating disorder, true or false? It's at least true. False, it's 1 in 4. 1 in 4. And in boys, a growing number of boys, especially boys who are in weight-related sports, like wrestling, but not only. Suicide is the 4th leading cause of death in adolescents today. Absolutely false. It's the number 2 leading cause of death, and it's quickly on its way to becoming number 1. In case you're wondering, the number 1 cause of death is incidents, accidents, right? In that category of accidents, motor vehicle accidents is by far the largest part of that category. 2 years ago, suicide for adolescents between the ages of 12 and 24 years old, and yes, adolescence continues until 25, especially for boys, maybe even 30. I don't think I came out of it until 30. I'm just putting that out there. I've been a grown-up for 14 years now. There we go. It eclipsed motor vehicle accidents as the number 1 cause of death 2 years ago. So it's a real deal. It's real serious. And I think your presence here tonight indicates that you understand that. And so we definitely will talk about it. Most teens who complete suicide had an untreatable mental illness. True or false? Absolutely false. Absolutely false. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because they had a treatable mental illness. If only we could have convinced them to get help, or if only there was somebody in their life who could have recognized the warning signs and intervened and loved them enough in order to be able to put up with their resistance. Because just because we go in and offer help doesn't mean that they're going to want it, right? Doesn't mean that they're going to want it. And so sometimes we'll get a lot of flack, and it puts tension in the relationship when we intervene. So Roy, why are so many kids hurting today? Why are so many kids hurting today? A few reasons, and I'm going to move quickly through them. The political climate, right? I don't care what side you're on, I will tell you that in our country today, we have a complete lack of civility in the political arena. We have a complete lack of civility in the political arena. I visited with a friend of mine's 11-year-old, and I don't work with kids that young because she was having panic attacks in school constantly. And as she sat in my office, what she began to tell me, she kept going, that man and that lady, they just kept arguing. Her parents made this 11-year-old girl watch all of the presidential debates so that she could be kept abreast of current affairs. I'm going to call it televised violence. I didn't even watch them, and I had panic attacks just thinking about the presidential debates existing, right? Political climate, exposure to terror and violence. You can argue whether we've always had as much terror and violence. I think that you'd lose that argument. I think we've seen it certainly escalate in our country, but the exposure to it and that they know about it is certainly higher today. Relationships. I'm not going to get into this tonight, but more than 50% of young people report being in an unhealthy relationship. 10% of young people report being sexually or physically abused in their relationship. Most of them, most teens, now that's a small majority, but most of them feel like in order to be in a relationship, they don't want you to know where they are, but they demand it of each other. You are going to share your location with me at all times. I want to know where you are. I want to know where you're going. I want your passwords to your Snapchat. I want your password to your Instagram, because it's just jealousy and it's a possessiveness that's unhealthy. But for the teens, it feels like intimacy. They don't have a guide. They don't have a gauge to be able to say whether it's healthy or not. It feels like they're close. This is how we do it. That's putting a lot of stress on young people. Their friendships. Their teens, we've known this forever. When they struggle, they go to each other first. And so that's another conversation that's worth having. And I've got resources for all of this. I'll just tell you about it later. But my podcast, everything I'm talking to you about tonight, every topic, I've got 75 podcasts, one about 20 to 40 minutes on each of these topics that if you want, you can go in depth on it. But yeah, relationships are tough. Friendships are tough. They're leaning on each other. A great question. Hey, do your friends ever come to you and talk with you about their problems? What's that like for you? Your teen is going to look at you like you're a savant. Oh, it's rough. Thanks. And I don't want to know names and I don't want to know issues, but just I'd imagine, I know that you guys lean on each other, and I'm just really wondering, if ever you're carrying something really heavy from one of your friends or a group of your friends, because some of your teens like being the teen therapist, and that's not good for them because they're carrying it. It's hard enough being a trained therapist at 44 holding everything I've got to hold, much less as an adolescent. So to ask about that. Uncertain future. They just don't know where the world's going. They don't know what they're going to do in college. Parental issues, genetics for sure, bullying. Right? Bullying face-to-face. 20% of young people report being bullied at school. Another 20% report being bullied online. Lack of failure, and we just have to own it, folks. We got to own this as parents. That we have been reactive to a generation of parenting that was very authoritarian, dictator-esque. Authoritative is the good balance, but authoritarian is that, you're going to do what I say and don't ask why, blah, 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 blah. So we as a generation have reacted to that. We've not only become a little more permissive, not all of us, right? And look, I know this isn't true in Missouri. I'm really talking about people in Arkansas. That's where it's really happening, right? Right? Is that we don't want our kids to fail. We don't want our kids to fail. We're busy, we're distracted, and so sometimes we'll even parent out of guilt. 160,000 young people each day miss school because of bullying. Attachment issues. We're going to see more and more of this because children, especially younger children, aren't attaching as well because what they need their mom to do and daddy to do, especially the mom, I'll pick on the dads, trust me, but what they need mom to do is they need to make that secure attachment, and they need that mirroring by looking in the eyes. And that's not going to happen when I'm here and doing this. And that's happening a lot. It's important. Teens still need it too. If I had $1 for every time a teen has told me, just like their parents have told me, I would talk to my dad if he'd ever put his phone down. My dad comes home and he's home, but he's on his laptop, right? And he's doing work. And I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about me. My kid could have said that about me about 5 years ago. I've gotten a little better. Less play. We've gotten school so serious. The amount of homework that my 7th grader has is mind-boggling to me. It's about 5 times more homework than my wife and I had when we were in 7th grade. There's just less time to play, and the kind of play they are engaging in is more virtual play, and that's not good for them. They're less resilient to traditional stressors, but let me defend them real quick and say that if we, where's this young man is he awake? Nope, he's not awake. Good for you. Go to sleep. That's great. Awesome. Rock it out. He would agree. If we went to school with him, we would get our butts kicked. We think that they're less resilient to our traditional stressors than they are, but boy, they're resilient to some stressors that would put us 6 feet under. Insufficient resources, they're busy. Social media. The jury is in, the verdict is set. Social media, we know, is one of the primary factors driving the mental health concerns in our country today for a couple of reasons. One, this produces dopamine in the brain. When somebody likes your Facebook post, when more people like your Facebook, when somebody shares your Facebook post, right? But for teens, a heart on Instagram, somebody viewing their Snapchat story, it produces dopamine in the brain. And dopamine, very simply, is what makes us feel good, right? And so the brain, like any muscle, if it learns that this is going to produce the dopamine, then it's going to stop producing and it's going to wait for this to do it. And so they're becoming dependent on that. So that's one of the reasons with technology. But a bigger reason for young people is just fear of missing out, which they call FOMO. Fear of missing out. I get depressed when I look at I'm finding more and more that I don't want to look at my Facebook feed. One, because again, I know I'm the only one in here. I'm jealous. I'm envious. I am. I don't necessarily want to go to everything, but I don't know about you, but I always want to be invited. I don't want to go to your party, but I want you to invite me. I want to at least know that you want me there, right? Now, girls and guys will do it differently. It is. Anxiety epidemic. So what is stress, real quick? Stress is the feeling that you get when you feel unable to meet the expectations that are placed on you. What is anxiety? Anxiety is taking ambiguous data and from ambiguous data, drawing from it the worst possible conclusions. Anxiety, very simple. One of the reasons so many young people are experiencing such high levels of anxiety is that ambiguous data is nonverbal communication from other human beings. Because when I spend more and more time here, I get very proficient at this, and they are. You know how well your teens can do this, right? What I get less proficient at is this. Right? And it's not the relationship, it's being able to interpret what that other person thinks about me or what that other person wants from me. And that's that's the ambiguous data for them, and it creates a lot of anxiety. They're getting less adept at reading social cues. They're certainly, we've known this for a while, less adept at social interactions. In fact, I said last night, I'll say it again, if you can write a really good book on small talk, or have a good resource for small talk for teens, you could make a lot of money. Because I don't know how to start a conversation. I don't know what to say. I hear that at least 4 or 5 times a day. What does anxiety sound like in the adolescent? I'm going to go through these quick. I just can't take the pressure anymore. I can't be perfect. Would people just understand that? 10th grader, generalized anxiety disorder, and had premature hair gray. I just can't put another thing on my plate, Mr. P. It's overflowing. They're all good things, but they're stressing me out. A junior having panic attacks. My stomach turns every time I think about going into the cafeteria. All those people, social anxiety disorder. I just keep hearing the sound of the bullets. What if someone like that comes here? I don't know if you paid attention, but this was a kid who was a friend's kid, right? They were just at someone's house and they just kept playing the network news after the Mandalay Bay incident. And if you didn't notice, they just kept playing the sound of the bullets behind the reporters over and over and over, right? And led more than a few people I know to have panic attacks. I just keep picturing my mom and dad, who I love and who I know love me, killing me and roasting me over a spit, right? 6th grade boy with intrusive thoughts, beginning signs of OCD. Now, if it were a little bit older, you might be like, well, he's right. We have thought about it and we discussed it. I mean, we're not going to do it, but we had a plan. right? He's in 6th grade. I hate getting out of the car in the morning. My stomach keeps flipping and flopping. Classic separation anxiety, right? If you only knew how much pressure is on me to get into a good college. I don't know what I'm going to do in my future, and at this rate, I may not be around for my future 17-year-old who only made a 30 on the ACT, right? Wait for it. Wait for it. I only made a 35 on the ACT. This doesn't guarantee me getting into MIT. I heard this a few months ago when I was on the road. And the kid who shared this with me after I spoke at a student assembly, right, knew that it was irrational, but he wanted to go to MIT, and he's right. You're not guaranteed. I knew a kid who made a 36, perfect score, aced it, didn't get into MIT, right? There's so much pressure, and they're putting so much pressure on themselves, right? Especially for college, and especially some of these overachievers who are trying to get into schools that almost no one gets into, right? And they've been planning for that their whole life. My parents think I don't care, but I do care. I'm just scared. I had no idea what I could do for the rest of my life. Mr. P, I don't even know how I'm going to pass my exams. And yet they're coming to me, talking to me about college, right? Brought him to counseling because he was cutting. I'll get really hot and my chest tightens, and I know if I could just get to the bathroom and self-injure, I'll be okay. 5th grade girl with generalized anxiety disorder. I want to sleep more, but I can't stop thinking and worrying about friends in school and stuff. Short-term insomnia, an indication of anxiety. A lot of kids who have anxiety have a hard time falling asleep, not because of this directly, but you can put this away, but this just keeps going. Voo, 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 and I can relate to it because I live with it. Not my wife, but me. I'm scared that if I stop worrying, something really bad is going to happen. That's an 8th grade boy, and I want to tell you the wisdom in that. And what I've found is that most people, adults, I used to think when folks came and said, I need you to help me get rid of my anxiety, I thought they wanted to get rid of it, only to find out that at the end of the day, they really love it. It's like their little precious pet. I love you, right? Because it drives them. It protects them. And right when you're just beginning to start make headway with somebody who's struggling with severe anxiety, it's not uncommon for them to regress because they're about to lose their best friend. And they know it's hurting them here, but this is afraid to let it go. Glad you made it. Now we know what happened to the dinosaurs. You don't need to write the bishop about the word crap. He saw it last night. Okay, here we go. So what does the adult brain sound like? The parent, typical parent right here. I know I should ask for help. I don't know why I don't reach out. I guess I'm afraid I'm going to look like a bad parent. Crazy, huh? I'm scared that if I push my kid, right, in their anxiety, I'm scared that if I push him, he'll hurt himself, but if I'll let up, he'll never face his fears. Parent of a junior boy. If I don't make her participate in these activities, she won't have a good shot at getting into a good college, which means everything to her future. That is a belief that many people have, but that is a lie. That is a lie. In fact, I didn't say it today, but what I'll probably say tomorrow at Springfield Catholic is that really, you think getting into a good college is the secret for your success in your future? Let me tell you 2 things that will make you stand out in your generation. Leave this in the damn car. Show up for work every day. You will skyrocket to the top of your generation, right? It's not, I mean, look, I'm all about going to good, I'm all about that, right? But it's not like the guarantee. Also, this has become a gospel, right? This has become a gospel, like a gospel definition of success for so many of us, and I have fallen into it, and still am tempted at times to fall into it. But this is not the gospel. Nowhere in the gospel of Jesus Christ does he say, you know what, right, after the Sermon on the Mount, it's not in there, but what I did say was, if you could only get into a good college. I know you're just fishermen, but if you could study up, then, right? But she asks me to do all these things. I'd be delighted if my kid got a B. I see everyone else's teens have it all together. I feel like we're the only dysfunctional family in town. We know that's not true. Everybody's dysfunctional. Usually the ones who look the least dysfunctional are the ones I'm most worried about, right? Oh, we never fight. Oh, God. Oh, God. I used to do couples therapy. Oh, we never fight. We never argue. Oh, no. I got out of couples therapy and started working with teens. It seems like my kid's doing okay. What am I missing? Right? Any parent today. So stress, when's it a problem? I've kind of already talked about these. I'll send you this if you want at the end. That's when it becomes anxiety. It's when it crosses over, fidgeting, picking, hair pulling, panic attacks. These aren't signs of stress, these are signs of anxiety. Roy, you're spending a lot of time on anxiety. I am. Because I would say over 90% of the depression that I see and the suicidal thoughts that I see in my office is depression that's not depression generated, it's anxiety driven depression. And we can fix the depression, but if we don't fix that anxiety, that depression is going to come right back. This is the epidemic in our country. Suicide is the symptom. Self-injury is the symptom. It's an anxiety epidemic, not a depression epidemic in our country. But let's talk about depression just real quick. I want you to know what it sounds like. 6th grade boy, I just feel like a heavy, hot, wet blanket on top of me. I don't know if I've ever been happy. So I guess I really don't know what it means to be happy. A 7th grade girl. I'm bored with this life. I want a new one. I thought taking those pills would be like exchanging this life for another one, like you do at Target. I know that my life is made up of moments right now. There's just too many moments and none of them are any good. If I could only make it to where there were no more moments. That's a passive suicidal ideation, right? And that's something that we got to pay attention to. And just, I know I'm using a lot of technical jargon, but passive means if I just didn't wake up tomorrow morning, that would be okay. If a car just blindsided me, I saw 2 accidents on the way over here. I'm very glad Father Scott Sonnenberg prayed over me right before I left the restaurant. But if a car just came and ran into me, that would be okay with me. That's passive. I want to take a gun or I want to do something to hurt myself. That's an active, right? They're both serious. This one gets neglected. So is it depression or sadness? Well, how severe is it? Is it more severe than it used to be? Did it come on all of a sudden, right? How sudden did it come on? How frequent? Is this continuing to happen? Now we know we've got more than just sadness, we've got some depression. The symptoms are very similar to anxiety, irritability, and that's a tough one because in the definition of teenager is the word irritability, right? But for teens, much more than sadness, irritability is a symptom of depression, more than they're just kind of moping around, withdrawal, isolation. Once the grades start dropping, it's time to get help. If you notice the grades start dropping all of a sudden, when the grades start dropping, you need to be picking up the phone and calling the school counselor or calling it because it's the train is coming off the tracks, but it's been ready to come off the tracks for a long time. The grades start dropping is one of the last final things. Like they've held it together, but they just can't focus anymore. Tend to sleep more, appetite, all of these things. Concerned friends or parents, depression causes, similar to anxiety, right? Abusive relationships, grief, loss. So what helps? One of the biggest things that helps, and especially for us, is empathic communication. From the word empathy, right? To be able to try to feel what the other person is feeling in our communication. And to do that, we want to ask empathic questions. And I'm going to give you the language. And this might be awkward for you, but try it. Just try to use it and email me back if it goes south, right? I can always delete your email if it's a hate email, not a problem. So this might be a starter for you when you go home tonight. I'm hearing a lot. This big bald speaker came in from Louisiana and he's telling us about the pressures that teens face today. This is just a good opener. I know that we, mom and dad, or me and our dad, right, are one of those pressures. And I do want to talk about that at some point. But I know there are others, and I'd love to know what other stressors or pressures you face. And then listen. Would you share 1 or 2 of those with me? What's it like? Now again, timing is important, mood is important, but the biggest thing is us taking the initiative and deciding that we're going to make it happen. And if after tonight you go a week and 2 weeks and it still hasn't happened, regardless of the mood or whatever, have the conversation with your teens about mental health issues. Teens want to talk about these issues. I wish you could have been in the gym today and saw, what I see every time I speak to young people. They're again, blah, 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 but as soon as I start talking about cutting, zoop. I start talking about anxiety, zoop, they're locked in, right? You could have heard a mouse pee on cotton when I was talking about it. Like it was that quiet, right? It was that quiet in that gym. He's vulgar. I don't know if I like this guy. All right, more empathic questions. What's it like for you when you feel anxious? What's it like for you when you have a panic attack? What's that like for you? I don't know, it's just scary, right? And then listen, I can't even begin to imagine what it's like to be a teenager today, for you to be going through that and feel whatever it is you're feeling or have experienced that. What's in bold are the key words, right? Because too often young people think that because we went to high school, and sometimes they think that because we tell them that. I've been a teenager, I know. The truth is, we don't know. We know some, right? We've got the empathy bridge, but we're not on the other side of it. We know what it was like for us to be in high school, and there are some similarities, but they're not. I know it might be hard for you to say right now, but what ways can I help and support you? What can mom do to help? What can dad do to help? These are really good questions. So the formula, take the initiative. Don't wait for your teenager to come to you to talk about these things. A lot of us are afraid, and I know many of you are afraid. And I know especially in religious communities that we're afraid to speak to teenagers. I remember I was in a city that I'm not going to name, at a school that I won't name, and this parent stood up and she all but dog cussed me in front of the audience because I had spoken to 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders about suicide, right? When there had just been 2 suicides in the previous year at a high school 13 miles away from where this school was. And she said, I can't believe you came in here and talked to these kids about it. And I was like, ma'am, when did you talk to your kid? Well, they're not old enough. Ma'am, a 5th grader just took his life at a school less than 13 miles away from here. We've got to talk to our kids about it, right? We've got the data to substantiate it. Now, how you do it is up to you. And trust me, there's a way to do it. But what I'm telling you to do is very safe. A lot of us are afraid that we are going to plant the seed in their minds by talking about it. The research shows that that is not true. In fact, the research shows the exact opposite, that talking about it in a conversation with somebody who cares, especially an adult who cares, lowers it, right? It lowers it. It gives them a feeling of validation and empathy. Oh, someone else, right? I'm not alone in it. Someone's recognizing it and wanting to talk with me about it. I've had the thoughts, right? So take the initiative and have the conversation. Do it in your own way. I love this number 2. I did a whole podcast on that. Say 50% less than what you normally would say. That's a general rule of thumb. And I know some of you are like, I wish you had followed that rule tonight, Roy. Ask genuinely curious questions as opposed to interrogative questions. You know the kind of questions you ask when they come home from a party? Not those. Right? Those are, who was there? What did you do? Blah, 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 blah. You know, you kind of have that tone, right? But generally curious questions. What's it like for you to experience this? Listen. Listen. I remember I was in Colorado Springs last year, and it was a parent and teen event, which was really cool. And I actually kind of got to do a little bit of like counseling, right, in the audience. And this teen was just kind of sharing her problems. And her mom was there on the other side of the church. And I just did what I'm telling you to do. I brought empathic listening, and then I taught the mom how to do it, how to bring empathic listening. And at the end of it, they didn't agree on the data. The mom still didn't agree to let the kid do what she wanted, and the kid still didn't like the fact that her mom wouldn't let her do what she wanted, but they were connected. They were connected because of empathic, genuine listening. And what the teen was able to say, I just want to know that you hear me. I want to know that you understand where I'm coming from, because that's the connection. We think we want agreement, right? We think that we need to agree. The truth is that we do need to agree on some things, but not as much as we think. What we really need is to be connected. And it's easy to connect here, but the more meaningful connection is here, right? This is what people pay me to help them do. The emotional, effective, right, connection, to get in there on the feeling level, which is tough because it requires a lot of vulnerability on our part and on the teens, and it feels awkward and it feels weird and we feel exposed and we feel stupid. And if you had experiences when you were a teenager like I did, when I'm talking to teens, it used to be when a teen would just kind of roll their eyes at me, I almost wanted to crawfish out of the room because I felt like I was 15 years old again, with people picking on me and bullying me like I was in high school. So depending on what your experience, listen, reflect back what you heard. So if I'm hearing you right, did I hear you right? Are you saying this? And then ask them, do you feel like I'm hearing you? And it might feel a little awkward, and it might get a little old, right? And you don't want to do this every day, but then follow up with them. Follow up with them. And you'd be amazed at what you might uncover. right? And again, I know that my wife and I at different subjects with we only have two, but it might be, unless you're a single parent, you don't have a choice, you got to get in there and do it. But if you can tag team, right, it takes a lot of wisdom and a lot of savvy. Here are some, I'm going to go real quickly because I want to get through the questions. Here are some other things that you can encourage your teens to do in addition to you talking with them, things that they can do to help them make lists, especially for anxiety. Seeing it, getting it out of the head. Now, what I always tell teens, when you're in your head, you're dead, right? This is where anxiety lives. It's here. Because as soon as you get in your body, as soon as you get out of your head and get into your body, right, you don't feel anxious anymore. So make a list, get it on paper, right? Prioritize. Prioritize. This is not a natural skill. Most adults I know struggle to prioritize various things in their life. Teens don't know how to do it, and if they're not being taught in school, they're not learning it. We've got to help them. I've got a picture in my office of steak and peas, right? And my famous saying to the teens, because I love meat and I like to eat, right, is focus on the steak, not on the peas. But the perfectionist wants to make those doggone peas perfect. Like, they don't care that it's a USDA 50-month aged piece of prime beef that costs $70. They're going to focus on the 10-cent peas and try to cook them as great as they can. Focus on the steak, not on the peas. Not every assignment needs to be perfect. Not every class needs an equal amount of attention, but they need us to be able to help teach them that, how to prioritize. This is really a myth. Time management, it's really priority management. You can't manage time. It's going to tick, 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 tock all day long, whether we like it or not. It refuses to be managed. What I think is important versus what's really important, help them manage their commitments, help them to track their time. Just watch how you spend your time in the course of a week. Realistic goals. Realistic goals versus reach goals. That's important. Because a lot of times teens think that their reach goals are realistic when they're not, and that sets them up for a lot of disappointment, right? It sets them up for a lot of disappointment. I could have a goal to be an NBA basketball player, but that's just not going to happen. That's just not going to happen for me. Anxiety mapping, which is kind of drawing it out. Anxiety mapping is, what are you stressing about right now? And I do this on paper. So what if that happens? And then write it down. So for example, a teen will come in, I'm worried about flunking my geometry test. Awesome. So I'll get up on my big whiteboard in my office, flunk geometry test. So what if you flunk it? Well, then it's going to hurt my GPA. Great, hurt GPA. What if your GPA is hurt? Well, then I'm probably not going to do as well on my standardized test. Great, low ACT score. What if that happens? Well, then I'm not going to get into the college I want. Right? Well, what if happens if you don't get into the college you want? Well, then I'm probably going to fall in with the wrong sort of people. And what happens if you fall in with the wrong sort of people? Well, I'm probably going to start doing drugs. And eventually I'll start with marijuana and eventually work my way up to heroin. And before you know it, I'm going to be dead for 2 weeks with a needle in my arm before anyone finds me. Okay, and then I get my red pen and I circle geometry test. Needle in the arm. We laugh with teens, but I bet with 90% of you, I could sit you down in my office and we would get to the same place. I know it because I do it every day. We worry about the same things. And when we map it out, we can see that it's irrational. But I don't know about you, but I don't like people telling me I'm irrational. No one wants to hear that, right? It is, but we don't need to say it. It's a great movie if you haven't seen it, The Penguins of Madagascar, right? Skipper looks over at Kowalski. He goes, Kowalski, remember our little talk about true but unhelpful comments, right? Not everything that can be said should be said, right? And so what if that happens and what if that happens? Help them, challenge them to face their fears, push them, right? Gently, but push them. Exercise is the best natural anxiety agent and antidepressant on the planet. I exercise every day because my life depends on it. I exercise every day because my life depends on it. I missed out on lunch today. Katie and Lynn can tell you. Me making my workout, and right now I couldn't even work out the way I wanted to because my foot's hurt, but I'm going to do something to exercise because I know what it does to the brain. Now, a lot of teens are involved in sports, and so they're active. You know when I tend to get them? Off season, when they're less active and aren't moving their bodies as much. Especially on a day like today. I don't know, but I drove from Cape Girardeau over here today, and I didn't see the sun. I mean, I was just wanting to have like a vitamin D mist in my face, right, to breathe it, right? So during the winter time, that's another thing, the sacraments, faith, the number of people who are experiencing mental health issues and the number of people who are becoming unaffiliated with religion are increasing at the same rate. I don't think it's a coincidence. I don't think it's a coincidence. You know, one of the things that I realized, thankfully, that's helped me so much, I used to see God as this apathetic narcissist up in the sky who really didn't care all that much, but wanted to make darn sure that you worshiped him on Sunday, that you showed up and you did your Catholic gymnastics and made sure to tell him how wonderful he is. That was my image. I thought, God, he needs it in order to feel safe and secure. God needs me to go to church, right? God's a controlling person, right? And I'm realizing what I know to be true now. God doesn't need us to go to church. God is very emotionally secure whether we go or not go. He's a big, healthy God. He's got a great therapist. He's great. God doesn't need us. I'm the one who needs to go. I need to go, especially in a world that's changing so rapidly. It's never changed more rapidly in the history of civilization. I need to show up on Sunday to something that's not changing. We complain, it's the same thing every Sunday. Yes, thank God it's the same thing every Sunday. Because nothing's the same in my life. It's always, we have competing needs, every one of us. We have a need for change, but that is being overmet by culture today. But we also have a need for stability, consistency, and routine, and that's being undermet by the way we live our lives. Religion, liturgy, the weekly going to Mass and receiving the sacraments, right? That helps us meet that need for consistency. But even more important than that, not on a conscious level for many of us, but unconsciously, for those of us who are Catholic, and I consider it a blessing to be Catholic. I love my Catholic faith for many reasons that a lot of folks don't know, but one of the reasons is that the Paschal mystery in the Mass, right? That each time we go to Mass, we see the suffering, we see the dying, but we also see the rising of Christ, right? In Mass. And the hope is that the Mass, that's why we go. It says go. The word Mass means sent. Go, get out of here, right? Go and find and live the Paschal mystery in our own lives. And the best part of that right now is that we have a certain hope. In the words of John Paul II, we have a certain hope in Jesus Christ. As depressing as these statistics are, it's so important that we don't let them drag us down. Make us alert. Make us aware, motivate us to act. But we are always mindful that our hope is in Jesus Christ, that there is resurrection. And we get that on a cellular level by going to the sacraments, personal prayer, silence. I'll ask my teens, can you just spend 1 minute in silence? And then the next day, maybe make it 2 minutes and 3 minutes. And most of them, not all, but most of them realize how much they enjoy it. I'm almost done, I promise. I know you guys need to go. The Serenity Prayer is important. I encourage my teens to pray that a lot. Encourage them to face their fears. I love this quote, courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, I'll try again tomorrow. Journaling definitely helps. Sleep helps. Screen limits. Routine, talked about some tuning out negativity. Most of us listen to too much bad news. It's all bad news. None of it's good news. You're not going to turn on the news and go, oh, that made my day, right? Unless you're getting your day made out of something negative. Encourage them to ask for and receive help. And deep breathing, square breathing is really important. I did it in the car on the way here today. It just relaxes the body, it relaxes the sympathetic nervous system, and it takes the body out of fight-flight mode and relaxes them. And it prevents the stress snowball. That's it. I'm going to open it up for questions. Just a couple of announcements real quick. We do have some books in the back that help support our nonprofit, Today's Teenager, which the funds from that are used to go to places that cannot afford to be able to bring me in, like the Diocese of Anchorage in Fairbanks, Alaska in January, to go to the Inuit and Inupiat villages there and talk about suicide prevention and to do some healing work with them. So that's where that goes. And there are a lot of places, especially in some of the more rural places, where they just can't afford it. And so that's where the funds go. A lot of what I talked about tonight is in the book. The podcast is free. Today's Teenager podcast. It's the biggest surprise of my life that this thing has actually taken off, that people are listening to it, and that it's really helpful. I'm a speaker. I'm a writer too, and I write really well, but it's just easier for me to speak. And just about everything I've ever spoken about is on a podcast, and they're there, and they're well produced. It's great sound. If you want to reach out to me, that's how you would do it. Reach out to me. And if you sign up your email in the back, we'll send you a PDF of all the slides and more, some of the ones that I didn't show. But now I'd like to open it up for questions, and we'll do questions. If you need to go, please go kind of quietly, but I do want to open it up for at least 10 or 15 minutes of Q&A, and then I'll hang around a little bit after that. Not everybody at once. Oh, you need my phone? Yep, you do. Sorry. Yes, ma'am. Thanks, Katie.
What do you think about
A chronic nose picker, it's a compulsive activity. It's a compulsive activity. It was probably an act. How long has it been happening? Since it was a kid?
4 or 5 years?
4 or 5. How old is the kid? Okay, never mind. It's hard for me to answer that question, because I need to know when it started and when it didn't. It's probably a compulsive activity. It's probably, unless there's any sort of other compulsive or like tick-related or impulse control things, it's probably a soothing thing. And it probably is soothing for the anxiety. But every day I hear of new symptoms. But that could be, it's just hard for me to know. It'd be 1,000 questions that I would ask you that I can't because you'd feel too exposed. So I find it interesting. I don't think it's the end of the world, something that could easily be, treated. I wish I could be more help, but I don't want to like dishonor you because I know that there's more complexity there, and I'm not going to just give you a simple Band-Aid answer for it. But I'll try to give maybe you guys one. Yes, ma'am.
So in trying to talk to my daughter who is 17, I'm positive she feels like I don't understand and I don't what her friends are going through, and I think she's the trusted person that's taking a lot of burden.
Oh, she's the teen therapist. Okay.
In some cases.
You're probably right.
But, with part of that empathic discussion, how do I acknowledge, I have no idea what you're going through. It's safe for me not to know what you're going through, but I still need to know what you're feeling. And so, I don't know how to do that.
What does she not want to, she doesn't want to let you know what her teens are sharing with her friends are sharing with her?
I don't know that it's even that. I just think that there's a lot of stress in her life, just even within her friend group and things like that I don't know if she can verbalize. I don't know if it is something I think there's a lot of stress on her that I don't know.
Yeah. So what I would ask, and again, I have a whole podcast on this, and I'll walk you through a script in that podcast. But what it sounds like basically is, you know what, I just know a lot of teens are going through a lot of stuff today, and I know they rely on your friends. What's it like for you to bear all of that? And again, start with this. And you might even interrupt yourself, go, even before I go there, you know what, I just think it says a lot about you that your friends are coming to you with their problems, right? Blessed, broken, and shared. No one will let you go to the brokenness until they first experience your blessing. Right? No one will let you go to the broken until they first experience. So we call it the sandwich technique in some way. Affirm them, boom, and then affirm them again, right? I know this in business culture, Dave Carnegie, whatever. But to compliment her, because it does, your friends must really trust you. That says a lot about you. I'm so glad that that's the kind of person your friends see you as, and I know that's who you are. But I also know that probably comes with a lot of stress. And I can't imagine what they're sharing with you. And what's that like for you? Is it stressful? Right? Again, do the open-ended. If you can't get with the open-ended, go to the yes or no. Is it stressful for you? Yes. On a scale of 1 to 10, how stressful? What's the most stressful it gets? And so those would be some questions. And again, it might be a process. It might not happen in that first conversation, but it's a process. And you're earning the right to be heard and to be able to listen to her more in the future by starting that conversation. Praise God. Yes, ma'am.
What kind of strategies do you have for the political arena that we're in? I mean, it does take a village, but it takes a country. Talking about kids watching adults act like idiots. And we have a huge, huge problem with no mental health beds, especially for adolescents.
It's a huge problem.
And
Huge problem.
so I think that some of that can be legislated. And do you have any strategies that are
For the legislation?
that are working?
That's not, you know, in terms of that, on that macro level, that's not my gift. I really wish it were. You know, when it comes to that, I will say, go ahead, what were you going to say?
I was just ready to say, I would be frustrated as hell if I had your job, because there are lots of kids that need to be taken out of the environment they're in, even
No
for a
question.
short period of time, so that they can regroup and get that solid foundation so they can go back and function.
No question.
There are no inpatient beds for these kids,
No.
and they go back to the same environment. It's like the foster parenting. I
Yeah.
mean,
You're right.
You make them fine for the time that you got them, and then it's just,
You know, and this is just, you know, try and get a kid to see a psychiatrist.
yes.
Pediatrician told me last night, 6-month wait. 8 to 12 months. In my area, I mean, we got to drive 4 hours. Like I'm in Lafayette, they got to go to Houston, you know, or go to the ER. Go to the ER, and then it's a crapshoot as to which psychiatrist you're going to get.
ER for 3 days waiting for a bed.
And that's assuming you trust psychiatrists. And I do, but there are some that I prefer and others. It's a real problem. It's a real problem. But when it comes to kids in the political arena, you know, Jesus died like this for a reason. He was in the middle. He wasn't on the left, nor was he on the right. He was in the middle. And what happens when you're in the middle is you get crucified. Right? It's easy to go to the extremes. It's really tough to stand in the middle and critique both. And be critiqued by both. Yes, sir.
So if you have a pretty open relationship with your children and you hear things about other kids' advice,
If you have a what, Ryan? I'm sorry.
a very open relationship
Very.
with you're very blessed with kids that communicate with you, and you know about other issues.
This one's, yeah, this is a tough one. If you know about other issues,
They don't
so
want you going to their parents.
absolutely, right.
It's going to kill them in
Yeah.
school.
So it depends on what those other issues are. It depends on what those other issues are, and there's a whole bunch of different ways you can skin that cat. So if it's not something serious like self-harm, an eating disorder that's been strung out a lot. Usually, if the eating disorder, if it's anorexia, it's going to be noticed. If it's bulimia, it's going to go unnoticed. Certainly, if it's suicide, and your kid is really worried that that other kid's going to take their life, that is an opportunity for you. That's going to be an opportunity for you and your teen to grow, because what I would do is I am going to cash in the relational capital I have with my kid, and I am going to have to breach their trust, tell them I've got to let their parent know, right? And as hard as that is, and as much as that might affect our relationship, not kill it, it will affect our relationship, I will deal with that over the thought of not doing anything and that other kid having taken their life. I'll sleep with this. It'll hurt, but I'll sleep over here. I just wouldn't be able to live with myself if I didn't do it. So if it's serious and you've got reason to believe that it's serious, so that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to call the school counselor. My kid's telling me they don't want to be on the record. My kid's telling me that this kid is really in some serious doo-doo, and I know that they go to school there. Could you at least check in on them? A former school counselor, we have ways of checking in on that kid that doesn't let them or their parents know where we got the information. Most parents, at the end of the day, if you're going to them with that, like they might ask, well, here'd you to it, ma'am? I don't want to say because, you know, or whatever, and they'll get it. They're worried about their kid's life, right? So does that help at all?
No, it helps a great deal.
Okay, good. And for smoking pot, a little bit, unless it's like crystal meth drugs and they're really, you know, those things I would say aren't necessarily worth breaching the relationship with your teen. Not that they're not serious, but I don't know that I would breach it. So thanks. I'm glad that was able to be helpful. Maybe one more. Let's see. Yeah, I got a couple more minutes. Oh, yes, ma'am. And then Hugh, and then you.
What are your thoughts on medication?
Great. I'm glad you asked that. And I spoke with the teens about it this morning. My thoughts on medication are, I have numerous ones. I think that it's very easy to get into an uneducated stance for or against medication. And I see a lot of folks who, because of hearsay and because of anecdotal experience or isolated experience, not based on research, right, who fall into either camp, medicines or their own personal experience. It's the devil or it's the best panacea ever since the resurrection of Christ. And it's really neither. It's somewhere in the middle depending upon the kid. And so here's what I know. I know that I've benefited 3 different times in my life from antidepressant and anti-anxiety medication. I know that it is better to seek counseling first, right? And get the counselor. The counselor, most counselors can't prescribe, but they can refer you to a physician who will. Most pediatricians, psychiatrists, and physicians want to work closely with the counselor because they don't want to do the therapy. They just want to write the script, and so they can get a good idea of what's going on. What we know is when medication and counseling are working hand in hand, that is the best outcome. As we know, however, that insurance companies will pay for medication, but they won't pay for the doggone counseling. And we know that. So what I think about medication is that it can be really helpful. For adolescents, many pediatricians are going to be judicious about it because of the black box warning. And the black box warning is that in certain cases, see, the medication doesn't cause, and I know we have some physicians in here, and please feel free to discuss this with me, but based on my research and my consultation with psychiatrists, what we really believe, and the drug reps, we don't think that they cause suicidal thoughts. What we believe is that they can do one of 2 things. Activate suicidal thoughts that are already there, make them greater, but more than that, sometimes people who are already highly suicidal, the medication gets them to a place where they feel good enough to act on it. And that's most of what the black box warning is. And so when we've got a lot of eyes on that kid, I'm not concerned necessarily about the medication, assuming we can supervise them depending upon the kid, depending upon the parents. Also depending upon how much genetics is involved here. So is it something that we can deal with counseling? But if you've got 4 or 5 generations of bipolar disorder, right? I mean, you can do bipolar 1, I mean, you can do therapy all day long, but you're going to eventually be looking for a mood stabilizer, you know, and serious depression. And again, some people need it more consistently. Others can do it episodically. I've benefited from it episodically. So those are my opinions. I would just encourage you to do your research, you know, on medication. We certainly know that certain ADHD medications are helpful for, you know, certain kids. We know that, and we know that other medications are as well. But that's it. Hopefully that was helpful. No? Well, let me ask you, what's your opinion on medication?
Well, I was just wondering if this sometimes with the counseling, because it's not covered with insurance, I see working with your equipment and things like that.
Yeah.
At least after my where I lived, it seemed like they were pushing the pills and not enough.
Yeah, no question.
And so then I was certainly concerned with medication without counseling.
Yeah, and all of those medications have side effects that need to be managed. There's a give and take. And medication with counseling is the best way. So thank you so much. Great question. Not that they aren't all great. What about my question? Okay. Well, I saw we had a hand here. Yes, ma'am.
13-year-old Coda has a weight
Mm.
siblings that are always thin. She's not built like that. She refers to herself as fat and ugly.
Yeah.
They tease her about being fat.
Yeah.
She doesn't like any form of exercise.
And that might not be your fault. We've got research that shows you can be genetically predisposed to like or not like exercise. You're welcome, for those of you who don't like it. You're welcome. You're welcome. Yes, I knew it. She doesn't want to exercise. This is really complex right here.
She doesn't want help. How can we?
She doesn't want help. She really wants help, right? What we want and what we most deeply want are often at odds. She wants help. She just doesn't want to risk. She doesn't know what the help looks like, and she doesn't know what it can do. She doesn't even know what help might look like because she's in where. So body shaming, bullying, that is what we call that. Weight shaming, it's a real deal. It's incredibly complex for girls. It is incredibly complex for girls. My recommendation would be a good female counselor who does not have a picture-perfect body. I know that that's just real world advice right here. You're getting it, right? I would never print that, and I know we put it on here, but just real world advice, right? A counselor, because I will make those referrals, and there are certain therapists that I know the teen's just going to sit there, that girl's going to sit there and go, it's easy for you to say, B-I-T-C-H. Look at yourself in the mirror. But I don't have your body. But a counselor, right, who isn't, you know what I'm saying. Are you following me? Okay.
She's seen a female counselor.
Good. Okay.
Who is not
Great.
slender.
Great. Perfect. Wonderful. And understand that this is a long process. This is not a quick fix. So if the counseling takes a while, it's supposed to, this is going to develop over adolescence. As someone in her life, the adults in her life, we've got to be real careful about the diets because it's easy to trigger an eating disorder in that kid. There's already an eating disorder there. Is she overweight?
Yes.
She is. Okay, so there might be some compulsive overeating, mild, but that's more treatable than anorexia or even bulimia is. And if we push the diet too much, which is why pushing exercise gently, inviting them, but ultimately it's her choice. I had folks who invited me who said, hey, you should go on a diet. I was like, oh, that's a newsflash. I never thought of that. Thanks, right? But I do think if my mom had been around more and she had gone exercising with me, I think that would have helped me. Exercise is really a great way to go as well as counseling. So it sounds like you're doing that. Great question. I honor you because that is very complex. One more, and then I'll shut up. Promise. Yes, ma'am.
I find in our family that mom and dad don't always agree on how to do things. My husband is the news junkie. He'll watch it from morning to night, and I'm the one that says, turn that crap off.
Yeah.
Any suggestions on how to?
Well, this is going to be on video, so I would recommend having him watch this video.
He knows.
Right.
There's no secrets.
Yeah. And so you can get the news last time I checked on devices that aren't broadcast throughout the whole house, and that could be maybe in your ears as opposed to having it playing on a loop where teens, the news isn't evil. I'm not trying to demonize it. I'm just saying that it's pretty doggone depressing, right? I know people who work I'm sure we have some in here, good news does not drive ratings. Bad news drives ratings. And so that is hard. It's hard, and it's hard to get on the same page, but that might be one way to help. Folks, I can't thank you enough for being here. On behalf of the young people in your life, thank you for being here. If I can be of any help after this, you know how to reach me. I'm all there. If you're wanting your teen to hear this message, one resource for your teen would be my TED Talk that is on YouTube, RoyPetitfils TED Talk. It's an 18-minute talk. And I want you to go look at it, because here's what I want you to know. You'll watch it, oh, that was pretty good. There's 222 comments, right? 200 of them are from teenagers. Most people who are watching that talk, I thought the talk is for adults, but the most people who are watching it and commenting on it are teenagers. And so now I'm just telling teens, hey, go watch this. They'll get my testimony as well as some validation and some empathy. That would be something really, really good for them. Thank you. Could we close with a prayer? Would that be all right if we close with a prayer? In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Precious Lord, thank you for the gift of this evening. Hold back the rain until we get to our cars. We ask you to bless the young people in our lives, Lord. If it's your will, heal them from any fear, useless fear and anxiety. Heal them in their depression, Lord, any sort of mental illness and any struggle. Lord, make your presence known to them in a way that they can feel and experience hope. Hope in the person of you and hope in a relationship with you. And we make our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you.